Imagine this. You've just wrapped up an interview with a candidate who was perfect on paper, but during the interview, something felt off. Maybe they arrived late or dodged a question that should have been easy to answer. You brush it off, make the hire anyway, and then before you know it, you're dealing with performance issues or disruption on your team or maybe an unexpected resignation. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. 74% of employers admit to hiring the wrong person for a position, and it's a costly mistake, up to $50,000 for a staff role or significantly more if it's an executive position. But here's the good news. Almost all hiring mistakes can be avoided if you pay attention to red flags that occurred during the interview process. So today, I'm going to share 17 red flags that every hiring manager should know. As a result, you'll be equipped with the insights to make smarter and more informed hiring decisions. The first interview red flag is if the candidate shows up late or disheveled. Let's be real, first impressions matter for a reason. If a candidate arrives late without a valid excuse or appears unkempt, it's a signal that they lack professionalism and respect for your time. Number two is if they're disorganized or unprepared. A candidate who hasn't researched your company or can't even recall the title of the role that they're interviewing for, which happens a surprising amount of the time, is someone who's displaying a complete lack of respect for your professional time and the role itself. It shows they're just genuinely not interested, so move on from that candidate. Red flag number three, employment gaps that the candidate can't explain. Now, here's the reality. An inconsistent job history may or may not be a problem, but what's important is for you to probe further and understand exactly what's going on. You need to know the reason for it. It's not something you want to be left wondering about. Number four is negative talk about previous employers. You can assume that any candidate who speaks poorly of the manager or company they previously worked for will do it again. They will bring that negativity into your workplace and beyond. Number five is candidates who make excessive demands or maybe any demands at all while they're interviewing. While it's of course acceptable for candidates to have preferences, making demands early in the process indicates entitlement, and that is something you do not want to bring onto your team. Number six is a lack of enthusiasm or curiosity. Candidates who show little interest or fail to ask questions are probably not invested in the role or your company, at least not to the degree that you should expect. Stay away. Number seven is when a candidate can't take ownership of their mistakes. Accountability is a must. Be very wary of candidates who deflect blame or won't acknowledge past mistakes. Ask them to tell you about a time they failed at something. What happened? What could they have done differently? And then what did they learn? If they can't answer clearly or they start pointing to others, that's a problem. It indicates a maturity issue that you really want to pay attention to. Number eight is if they're asking inappropriate questions. If your candidate is focused on PTO or vacation time or when they're going to get a raise too early in the process, it's a bad sign. It's a big cause for concern, especially since neither of you fully yet understand whether there's a mutual good fit. It's just not something that should come up early. Now, one thing to keep in mind is young professionals may not realize what's taboo. So if you're interviewing someone who's really earlier in their career, consider giving them a break in this area. Number nine is if they act defensive or combative when challenged. The candidate is there to impress you as the interviewer, and that means being willing to discuss previous activities and results, both the good and the bad. If they're challenged on something and they immediately deflect or start to get emotional or even upset, that's a really bad sign and an indication that this is not someone you should be hiring. So avoid that at all costs. Number 10 is if they have poor listening skills. Are they avoiding eye contact, cutting you off while you're talking, or maybe not really listening at all? When they're in an interview, which is a time where they should be putting their best foot forward and they're not fully paying attention or engaged, that's a potential disaster if you hire them. Number 11 is if they're providing vague or evasive responses. Clarity is a form of confidence. So if your candidate can't articulate the things they've done in the past or provide easy to understand responses to straightforward questions, it's a big red flag. One of the things you can do here is to reframe the questions that you're asking. Get specific. Ask them to walk through their exact role on a project listed on their resume or about the decisions they made personally on something they claim to have responsibility for. The more you can nail them down, the better you'll get a feel for what they actually accomplished. Number 12, job hopping without a clear story. So this is similar to the gaps on the resume that I mentioned earlier. There may be a very good reason for job hopping, especially over the last few years where there's been a lot of layoffs that have been prevalent in certain industries. And it may be no fault of the candidate if they find themselves having multiple jobs in what you consider to be a short time frame. Regardless, it's something you need to drill down on. It's a potential indication that the candidate is unwilling or unable to stay anywhere very long. Dig for the answers you need, which is a recurring theme in this video that you've probably picked up on by now. If something catches your attention, drill down into it. You'll find that the deeper you go, the answer will either get better or perhaps significantly worse. But either way, you're going to end up with the information you need about the person you're considering hiring. Number 13 is explanations that don't support what's on the resume. When you're interviewing the candidate and they're listing skills or previous responsibilities you don't see on their resume, that should catch your attention, and you really need to find out where the truth lies. When a candidate can't recall what's on their own resume, it's a big sign that they're probably fabricating something. Look, everyone forgets details, small details, dates, or specific figures. That's understandable. But if they can't remember things like skills they claim to possess or significant career milestones, that's inexcusable. So be sure to match what's said with what's on the actual resume. Number 14 is arrogance and entitlement. Now, I shouldn't have to say anything more beyond that. That should be enough. But here's the thing. You want a confident candidate, but when confidence turns into arrogance, that's an entirely different deal. So watch out for those candidates who act like you're lucky to be interviewing them. It should be a mutual benefit, so proceed accordingly. Number 15 is when they don't have clear goals or direction. A lot of candidates will say anything when they're highly motivated to get a job because they've been on the market for a while. They need the income. It's natural. I get it. They have bills to pay, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's someone you want to hire. You have to make the right decisions for you and your company. So always ask the candidate to give you a clear picture of what they're looking for in their career, what their professional objectives are, and where they want to end up. If the answers don't align with your specific needs, even if it's someone who otherwise would be a great hire, it's not going to end well, and you need to acknowledge it and make that decision to move on. Number 16 is reluctance to provide professional references. Now, I phrase it that way for a specific reason. It's something that's near and dear to my heart as a staffing company owner for the past 20 years. It's not about getting a reference. It's about getting the right reference. It's easy to give the name of someone you carpooled with or went to lunch every day with for 3 years, but that's not the reference you need. You need to know exactly who that candidate reported to. And as you ask for that reference or multiple references from previous employers, a lot of candidates will balk, and that's okay. That's getting to the result you need. If the candidate isn't willing to provide that information of who they reported to, it's probably a pretty good indication that it's not going to be a positive reference. And so that is ultimately getting to the answer you need. And finally, number 17 is if they lack questions for you, the interviewer. You've taken the time to prepare. You're considering this person to join your organization, which is a big commitment on both sides. And if they show up without having any questions at all, it's just a sign that the true interest isn't there. We've mentioned that a couple of times in different ways, but this is a really big one. You should always end an interview giving the candidate the opportunity to ask questions. And if they don't have any at all, it's just a really big red flag and something you need to acknowledge. So that's it. 17 red flags. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, please reach out to us at connect@fourcornerresources.com or make a comment here. And if you like what you've heard, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and, of course, like the video. Thanks for listening.